There are very few guests that I have on the show that bring me to tears, and today's guest is one of those people. Camille Cates is my guest today, and she has an amazing story of healing, not only from the trauma and pain of abortion, but also the loss of her young daughter who was murdered by a boyfriend of hers. This is not a conversation that I would suggest. If you have young children listening, this is sort of my warning to you guys. This is probably not at least listen to it first before you listen to it with your young children. Camille's going to share her testimony, and she's not leaving anything out. And for the next 2 days, we're going to talk about the healing that God has in store for those of us who can lean into His Word and trust His promises. This is a powerful, powerful episode of hope and healing after trauma and abortion. Stick around. I think you're going to be encouraged. Thank you guys for tuning in. Before I jump into my conversation with my guest today, I want to let you know that you can find her at agrittygospellife.com. That's agrittygospellife.com. Camille does biblical counseling. She's written a phenomenal book that I hope you guys will avail yourselves of. If you know someone who has struggled through an abortion, or if you are post-abortive yourself, Camille has a brand new book out that I think is going to be really important for every single person who is trying to speak into the conversation about abortion. So I hope you'll check out her book. It's called Moving Forward After Abortion, Finding Comfort in God. Camille's story is a powerful one, and her book takes it to the next level by teaching us how we can walk through women and men who are post-abortive and find the healing and grace that comes from the Lord. Her book's available from New Growth Press and also through Amazon and wherever books are sold. Again, the name of that book is Moving Forward After Abortion. And without further ado, this is my conversation with my friend, Camille Cates. So Camille, welcome to the podcast. I'm glad that you're here.
Thanks for having me, Heidi. It's exciting to be with you today.
It's so much fun for me to meet friends of friends that at the Creation Museum and through the ministry of Ken Ham. I know you are a super fan, and we have friends over there, but this is your first time on my podcast, and I would love for you just to share a little bit of your own story and why you have so much compassion for women who have had an abortion and coming into this season, right? We're coming into a very contentious election season, another really important cycle in a post-Roe world. So things have really shifted. So tell us a little bit about you, where you came from, what your story is.
Sure. So I grew up in the church. I had heard all of the Bible stories about all these superheroes of the faith growing up. And, I had heard about Jesus and his dying on the cross for sinners. And it wasn't until I was about 12 years old, I went to youth camp, and I genuinely put my faith and trust in the Lord to save me from my sin. But going back home after that youth camp experience, I really didn't know what else to do with Jesus. I just did what I thought we were supposed to do, which was go to church, read our Bibles, and pray. And those are all great things. Those are all shapers of our faith. But I didn't really realize there was more to a relationship with Christ than I had going back home. So I just kind of lived this regular church kid kind of life, and entered middle school and high school and was really boy crazy. From the time I was little, I got in trouble kissing a boy in my preschool class. So I've always loved relationships. And as a young woman, I was really envious of some of the girls that I saw in school in these relationships. So when I got into high school, almost everybody was dating, and I jumped in, but I didn't have any kind of discipleship, good biblical background for God's design for a relationship. So I became sexually active very young at age 15, and I became pregnant at 16. And I remember my parents were, they were leaders in the church. And when my mom found out I was pregnant, she came to me and she said, "Camille, do you want to have an abortion?"
Your
And at the
mom?
time,
This was
my
your
mom,
mother?
yeah,
So
my mom
your
did.
mother who is a leader in your church.
She was our church's preschool director.
Wow.
So, it kind of shocked me that she would tell me that. And I thought, I know that I shouldn't have had sex outside of marriage. I knew that, but I did. But I knew, like, God does not want me to have an abortion. That would be wrong. And so I just told her, I said, I really want to keep this baby. And thankfully, my parents supported me. They said, well, we love you. We'll support you. And so they did. And I pushed through, graduated high school early, and my daughter was born that summer. And right, I walked the stage 6 months pregnant. So I was that girl. A lot of times people,
Wow.
people have stereotypes, Heidi. They think every woman that's had an abortion or in a crisis pregnancy is a teenager or a young adult. That's not always true. But for me, that was my story. And so, by the time I had my daughter, at the end of the summer, my mom really pushed me to get my education. So I started college full time 2 weeks after my daughter was born.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it
Wow.
was crazy. And I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
working a couple of part time jobs and just trying to figure out life again. And, I had this baby. And so I'm just, kind of doing what I can do. And I'd fallen away from church during that time. But one of our church women came over to my house one day and she said, Camille, where are you? Like, we
Mm.
want you. Come back. And that's all it took. So I just want
Someone
to
just to
encourage
reach
people.
out to you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
People that are watching, like, if you see those young people that have fallen away, go after them.
Mm.
They're longing a lot of times for somebody to say, come back. We love
Where
you.
was the father of your baby?
Yeah, so I mean, it's typical story. He was like, "Oh, this isn't my baby. I don't want anything to do with this baby." And it
Mm.
was a very casual relationship, and so he was long gone, not in the picture at all.
Wow. Was that
And
hard
so
on you, or were you just like, it was not really in my life anyway?
no, it was hard. I mean,
Yeah.
I craved that relationship, and God gives us that innate desire for
Hmm.
family
Yes.
because that's his design.
Hmm.
And so I really missed that, wanted a father for my baby, and I think that's at some point she was a little bit older, about 10 months or so. I began dating again, and I really wanted to find that father figure for her,
Yeah.
somebody who would love me, somebody who would help us be this family, this complete family. And so I began dating again, but I had not been discipled um, back to what a biblical, healthy, relationship should look like.
Hmm.
So we became sexually active very quickly. I became pregnant again, and at that time, I was just fearful of what my parents were going to say.
So
They
were you
ended up.
18 then? At this point, you'd have been what, 18 years old roughly?
I was, yeah, I was. I think it was about to turn 18 at
Okay.
that time. So very short time. My daughter was coming up on a year old at that time, and my parents found out. And my mom again came to me and she just said, "We really think you should have an abortion. We don't think this is fair to Lauren, my daughter. You guys are both trying to figure out life." And so there was a lot of external pressure
Yeah.
to have an abortion, and so we kind of didn't. We were young. We didn't know what to do.
Was he a
Started kind
believer?
of.
Was he a Christian, this young man?
No, he had a different background, faith background, but he was excited. His parents had found out about the baby. They were excited. So when my parents weren't, we kind of
Hmm.
had this conundrum of what are we going to do? And really, the things that they were telling me really put a lot of doubt in my mind and began to
Mm.
question, is this the right thing to do? How am I going to finish school and raise two babies and all of
A lot of
that?
the what ifs.
A
What if
lot of
this and
what
what
ifs.
if that? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that really created a lot of doubt in my mind. And, it. we never got to the point of deciding together if that's what we were going to do, because one night I was up at work and my boyfriend was watching my daughter for me. And my mom came up to my workplace and she said, Camille, you've got to come to the hospital. Something's happened to Lauren. And so I'm a mess. I'm in tears and shock. What's going on? I leave. We go up to the hospital and just trying to get some good answers from my boyfriend, like what happened, what's going on. And there was this narrative that was created that we came to find out was not true. And we found out through the course of 24 hours of waiting at the hospital that he had sexually assaulted and shaken her to death,
Your daughter?
my daughter. And so we're up at the hospital. It was just it was a crazy night. When I had first got there, they wouldn't let me go back to see her, and I couldn't understand why. I couldn't go see her, and then the Child Protective Services came. They interviewed him and me and my dad, and I thought, what is going on? Like what? But I couldn't. I think with the trauma and everything that was going on, I couldn't figure out
And you,
what
at
was
this point, you didn't
happening.
understand, you didn't even know what was happening with your daughter. You just knew they wouldn't let you see
No,
her.
I just knew. You're right. I knew that she had supposedly she had choked on something while he was watching her. She became unresponsive. He called my parents before he even called 911 to come over, and my dad had done CPR on my daughter, and they got her to the emergency room, and so nobody had seen her since that point, and yet we're being asked all these questions. And at that time, Child Protective Services told me, they said she's got brain bruises, she has contusions all over her brain, and we believe that's from somebody shaking her. And I just thought, what are you like? Could she have fallen off the couch? Could she, like, what? How did this happen any other way but somebody doing this? And
And you had no indication before that from your boyfriend, right? That he had
none.
this side of him at all.
None, none, none. And years later, and being in biblical counseling, you look back and it's actually pretty common for, partners or boyfriends of women to abuse their children. But I was young, I didn't know, I was very trusting, no signs of that at all. And then the next day, her pediatrician pulled me into the hospital room, and that's when she told me about the sexual abuse. And at that point, I knew what had happened and knew who had done it. And so she was gone. At that point, she was legally brain dead, and my parents had talked to me, and they have the consultation rooms, and we were in there, and my mom is just telling me, she said, Camille, you have to have an abortion now. Like, there's no other option. And
So now they're going
so
to
we had,
compound your pain.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the trauma of what's going on. So we hadn't even left the hospital, and they're already talking about having an abortion. So, it had just about a week of time in there between having my daughter's funeral and then processing and thinking through this. And I really wrestled, even in my young, like not strong relationship with the Lord. I still cried out to Him in prayer. I was just like, God, help me. I don't know how to make sense of this. And I talked to my parents. I said, maybe I should have this baby. We could place the baby for an adoption. I have an adopted sibling, and so we have a heart for adoption. And my mom was just like, Camille, you're not going to be able to make it. You won't make it through. She was speaking off of things that she didn't understand. She was trying to tell me that there would be like a big custody battle, which I don't
Yeah.
think that there would have been at
Well,
all.
especially no after what had happened. I mean,
Right,
that's a
right,
no-brainer. Yeah,
right,
right.
right. But here
Was
I
he
am,
prosecuted, this boy? I'm assuming
yeah.
that he was prosecuted.
Yes, yeah. He's still serving a capital murder sentence.
He
Um,
still is. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
How
So,
so? How long ago was this?
gosh, Heidi, it was um, 1992.
Wow,
So, you know,
long time.
gosh, yeah, a long time ago. And so, you know, with all of that, those doubts and those things clouding my mind, I remember just even praying, like my theology just was so off.
Yeah, yeah.
And, God, oh, this, I'm unique. My situation is unique. Somehow, some way, you've got to make it okay just this one time. So even in my heart of
Mm,
hearts, like I knew what I was doing was wrong,
mm,
but I just couldn't see another way.
yeah. In so
And that,
much pain. You're just in
yeah,
so much pain
yeah,
already.
grief
Yeah.
and the trauma of that. And so, and not
Mm,
having another voice to offset what I was hearing from the pressure from my parents. So we buried my daughter, and 4 days later, I had an abortion. And
mm,
then my life just began to spiral,
mhm.
downwards after that for a good 2 or 3 years until the Lord, got my life back on track, helped me to get my life back on track with Him. So that was a really dark time, in being so young. But
Now, when you say that, the Lord helped you get your life back on track, what was the beginning of that? Was it people reaching out to you? Was it you just seeking the Lord on your own? How did that happen?
yeah, so I talked about spiraling, for a
Mm-hmm.
good 2 years, and just living in our darkness, just this
Yeah.
depravity, because I didn't care anymore. I felt like I had lost
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. Well, because
So
you
I was just
had.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
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 So I was
Yeah.
just like, whatever, with whoever, whenever, I don't care about my life anymore. And
Mm.
they kept delaying my daughter's capital murder trial, and that was really hard because I didn't have any
Yeah.
closure.
Yeah.
And so, about the third or fourth time that they had postponed it, I had moved away from home, and I just decided, like, this is not working for me either. I couldn't get settled no matter where I was, because the only way I was going to be settled was with the
The
Lord
Lord. Yeah.
and with His help. And
What
so,
part of the country were you in again? I know you said it, but I forgot.
yeah, I'm from Texas, and
Okay.
so I was living in, I grew up in Amarillo, Texas, and I had moved away to Dallas. And I always tell young people, like, you know, if your heart hasn't changed, you'll just go to a new place and find the same people doing the
Yeah.
same
So
stuff
true.
and get right back in. And so that's what I had done. I only found more of it in a bigger city. So the Lord helped me to just have a really unsettled heart. And I moved back home. I was like, this isn't working for me. And I remember going out one night with a guy that I had dated previously, and he had taken me home at the end of the night, and he was kind of like wanting to be sexually active again. And I remember my something in my heart just snapped, and I was like, I know where this is going to lead. I don't want any more of that pain, and I am done.
Mm.
And so I just said, no thanks. And I left, and I went into my home, and I threw myself on my bed, and I cried out to the Lord. And I said, God, I have been chasing every other relationship in my life except the one I have with you. And I am done. And my life changed at that moment when I really surrendered to the Lord. And I realize now, I don't know that I verbalized this at the time, but I had really just had this heart of idolatry of relationships, and not understanding that that longing is given to us by God to point us to Him, and that fulfillment of the perfect relationship through salvation with Christ in Him. And so after that time, the Lord brought a young man in my life who had just graduated from seminary. We had grown up in church together. And so he kind of, I always say jokingly, he was godly stalking me. So, like, our families knew each other, and he'd see me around town, and he just kind of kept coming over and, hey, you want to hang out? And So we started hanging out as friends, and he just told me one night that he had feelings for me. And I thought, well, okay, I know he knows about what happened with Lauren, but he doesn't know about my abortion, and he's headed into youth ministry, and he doesn't need a girl like me.
Oh, so the shame.
Yeah. And so I think he sensed that hesitation in me. And he looked at me and he said, Camille, I know about your abortion and I love you anyway. And that just freaked me out. So I left. I was like, okay, thanks, bye.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Because now you're in like self-protection mode.
right, right. I'm
Yeah.
like, what is going on? What's happening, God? And I just remember the Lord just kind of sweetly bringing to mind that He's holy and He loves sinners like us, and He sent His Son to die on the cross because He loves us and He wants to be with us anyway. And that was such a sweet picture of the gospel to me. So, Heidi, I did the smartest thing I could, and I married that man. And we've been married 28 years this past
Oh,
year. And so God has just used that sweet picture of the gospel to help me and grow me. But even after that, so we're married, and I'm a mess because I still haven't really dealt with my abortion. I've turned back to the Lord, but my abortion is wreaking havoc in our marriage, and I was really living off of this fear of, I know God's forgiven me, and this is really common with a lot of post-abortive women. I know God's forgiven me, but what if He doesn't let me have any more children? That's like my punishment that I have to live with.
wow. Okay, so we're I'm out of time for today, but we're gonna pick this up again tomorrow
Sure.
because your story and the reason it's so compelling to me. I'm sitting over here just, I mean, honestly, Camille, I have goosebumps from like for head to toe because the Holy Spirit works so powerfully in your story and in your life. Would you be willing to come back tomorrow and we'll finish the story? Everybody's
Absolutely.
on the edge of their seat going, wait a second, you can't do that. But I'm out of time. I'd love it if you come back tomorrow and we'll pick this up then.
Sure thing.
I hope you guys are enjoying this. I know that I am. If you're watching this on Rumble or YouTube, you can see that I'm crying too. It's an amazing, you guys, we serve the healer. You know, I came from a very hard background. Camille has a story of healing all her own. And for those of you who are listening and you need information, you need some help, we're going to encourage you that way. I'm going to send you to Camille's website, and I hope you guys will check that out and then come back tomorrow because this story has a beautiful ending to it because we serve a risen Savior. Thank you guys for listening. I'll see you right back here again tomorrow at the intersection of faith